Millions of ancient soldiers are massed in the heavy early morning fog on the eve of the Kurukshetra war. Surveying this sprawling assembly is Duryodhana, the commander of the Kuru army, calculating the exact scale of the forces arrayed against him. These Bhagavad Gita pages capture this moment. Verses 7 through 11 provide a rigid military briefing. Focusing on verse 10, we see Duryodhana describe his own forces as aparyaptam, meaning immeasurable, and the enemy's as paryaptam, meaning limited. He commands 11 divisions to the opposing army's 7. Mathematically, he possesses a superior force, yet his phrasing betrays a desperate need to convince himself of a victory that the math already guarantees. The purport, a traditional Vedic commentary, extracts the psychological subtext from the literal verse. This commentary functions as an exegetical X-ray, exposing the hidden motives and fears driving the commander's specific word choices. A rigorous reading of this military briefing reveals Duryodhana as a commander defined by intense tactical paranoia. The text demands we read between the lines. Long before a single weapon is drawn on the battlefield, the true war is already raging within Duryodhana's mind. In verses 7 through 9, Duryodhana catalogues his captains, using the roll call to manage the internal politics of his command. Examining his opening maneuver in verse 8, he highlights exceptional heroes, Bhishma, Karna, and Kripa. The commentary exposes his diplomatic tightrope. He speaks directly to his teacher, Dronacharya, but emphasizes the greatness of other men. The Kuru army is a coalition of legendary egos. Many of these generals have conflicting allegiances and deep-seated personal rivalries. Overpraising one general risks insulting the deeply held pride of another. If he leans too heavily on Bhishma, he alienates Drona. This friction dictates his wording in verse 9, noting these men are prepared to risk life for my sake. In Sanskrit, mad arte tyakta jivita. This specific phrase exposes his insecurity. He requires constant vocal validation that his mercenaries are actually willing to die for his personal cause. This roster is a tool of frantic political management, used to keep a splintering coalition together. Moving from the political landscape into direct tactical analysis, we look closely at his comparative assessment in verse 10. The text relies on exact structural symmetry. Duryodhana mirrors the terms Bhishma Birakshitam, protected by Bhishma, with Bhima Birakshitam, protected by Bhima. On the Kuru side, the logic tracks. Duryodhana roots his entire confidence in grandfather Bhishma, his most experienced and revered general. This comparison isolates the anomaly. On the opposing side, Duryodhana identifies Bhima, a warrior with less command experience, as the primary anchor of the enemy force. This is a tactical error. Arjuna is the superior warrior, yet Duryodhana obsesses exclusively over Bhima. The commentary isolates the cause. Duryodhana harbors a deep personal animosity toward Bhima specifically. He knows that if he is to die in this brutal war, it will be by Bhima's hands. This hyperfixation on a single individual distorts his entire strategic worldview, blinding him to the actual distribution of threats on the battlefield. His estimation of his own immeasurable strength is a comforting illusion. His tactical calculations are irreparably skewed by his personal terror. This compromised worldview dictates his final command in the sequence, verse 11, where he issues specific deployment orders. The literal command requires all generals to give full support to grandfather Bhishma at their respective strategic points. This illustrates the vyuha, or phalanx. Under ancient rules, Bhishma sits at the very apex of the wedge. The commentary reveals the tactical reality. Though undeniably powerful, Bhishma is an old man. If fully engaged at the apex, the formation's flanks become critically vulnerable. Duryodhana's order is driven by the fear that the enemy will exploit Bhishma's age and singular focus to break the entire formation. Simultaneously, the commentary reveals a secondary, diplomatic reading. Duryodhana realizes he has made a political error in his speech. By elevating Bhishma so highly in the previous verses, he risked making the other generals feel irrelevant. Verse 11 is a backpedal to assure the remaining officers that their positions are equally crucial. This standard defensive order serves two desperate needs: protecting against tactical flanking and preventing internal mutiny. Stepping back from the minutiae of troop deployments and diplomatic flattery, we confront the overarching philosophical reality of the text. Returning to the commentary of verse 9, we find a devastating conclusion regarding the Kuru army. It is already concluded that all of them would die. A strict moral fatalism governs this conflict. The army is doomed not by tactics, but by the karmic weight of prior actions, specifically the rigged gambling match that initiated the war. Duryodhana engages in desperate materialistic accounting, counting weapons, men, and phalanxes against an absolute, unyielding moral verdict. The traditional exegesis exposes a tragic psychological portrait beneath the military roll call. The text demonstrates that no amount of material superiority or strategy can compensate for psychological fragility and moral deficit. The Kuru army was already defeated in its commander's mind before the war even began.